Okay, so this week we have two big concepts I think that go really well together when integrated for teaching and for learning. So we have the Socratic Method. This is great for developing communication and constructive dialogue in regards to topics that otherwise would be very challenging to address. And they still are challenging to address even when we implement this style of teaching and learning through constructive dialogue, creating safe spaces where we can talk about things that aren't necessarily easy to communicate in a safe space, and the concept of Mitakuye oyás'iŋ, meaning we are all related, we're all relatives. That goes beyond me and you as human beings and also goes into our surroundings and how what we do impacts our surroundings, right? So like environment definitely plays a role in regards to our behavior, and behavior is a form of communication. And these are things that are important to know when you're teaching, is that the environments that we create impact the behavior of our students, and that behavior is a form of communicating needs. And when it's bad behavior, what we usually consist as being bad behavior is a form of needs not being met. I think this is very important because it puts the responsibility on us as educators to address these issues opposed to always putting it on the students. Now, it's important for the student and anybody, an adult, to take responsibility for their own actions. I think this is something that we see a lot today and is problematic, and we're seeing from adults and people in leadership, right? Like, we do need to take responsibility for our actions, but to have a deeper understanding of how our environment and other factors are impacting our behavior, and thus eventually for a student or an adult to create a space that's most conducive for us as an individual to produce the best results of who we are as a human being, what we're capable of truly being and truly showing. So these are important factors when we go into designing a classroom space. But even if you do something like a Socratic Method, Socratic seminars within your classroom space, if it is structured in a way that is often how we see in American society as a very individual perspective of me doing it and can do it by myself, and I am right and the other person is wrong, and that being the frame of reference of our independence as Americans, that's very contradictory to community, to tribal understandings of relationships among other people, where it's not structured in a way that is a debate or a power dynamic of winning and losing, opposed to development of understanding. Now, this will help our students develop critical thinking skills because they are rooted in a place where they can actually listen to the other human being. Because if we break it down to the relationship of one another, we create safe spaces to be wrong, to build understanding, and to develop the skills that our society needs right now, right? Like historically, at one time, not too long ago, I mean, when I look at my parents, my dad predominantly voted red and my mom predominantly voted blue, Republican, Democrat. But at the same time, not only were they not mortal enemies, but they could get along, figure things out, and love each other and be married to one another, right? And those are amazing skills to have. And we look at the importance of how we structure constructive dialogue and the importance that has with not only building understanding, but building a space that's conducive for all students, all people within a community and with a society. So when we look at developing a Socratic model, we're looking at not structuring things in the form of a debate, but structuring things in a form of building understanding. And I think one thing that goes really well with this, that you'll see in the article that goes along with this, is a talking stick, right? And this is something that we use in the classroom setting, or where there's variations of it, like you have to have the tennis ball in order to speak, you have to raise your hand. These are all kind of like modern variations of the talking stick. And I'm not going to get into like the whole history of the talking stick, in indigenous cultures and its origin, but it was extremely important in terms of establishing democracy, establishing constructive communication and dialogue between different tribes. Is rooted in the history of democracy of this land, the United States of America, predating that even, right? And then Also for ceremony, also for different rituals, depending on the tribe, there would be variations. And I'm not trying to give you an overview of the talking stick and the history of it, but the application of that concept within a classroom setting. Now, one thing that we always get wrong as educators when we replicate this talking stick model in developing communication skills with one another is we think it's only a talking stick. And I think it'd be better defined as a listening stick, because historically, in order to have the talking stick and to communicate how you feel, you first would have to express understanding of what was previously said, and having that be adequate enough for the first speaker to then say that you understood my intent as a speaker, and now you can say your truths and your words, right? That had to happen, so it eliminated the ability for the other person to manipulate what the other person had said to gain, power or manipulation of others, right? Like, it forced that other person to not take it out of context and to put it into some other frame of reference. And that's so important for building understanding. And this has become, I think, almost like a lost art. Like we have these safe spaces where we as educators doing Socratic seminars with our students are facilitators. We're helping students see other perspectives. We're helping see similarities. We're helping them build understandings of one another. It's not a debate. We're not trying to pin a winner or a loser. And a lot of times when you look at like historical indigenous models of teaching and learning, it wasn't competitive like what we do today within school. It's much more community constructive based. And that's why I think the Socratic model works really good with Mitakuye, Oyas'in, that concept of relation. And when you ever are in indigenous spaces, when you have elders speaking, even if they are very important, not only in terms of like maybe being on tribal council or just an elder or a speaker, is they usually create a humbled space by either showcasing humility, teaching us that through how they introduce themselves, also creating a space that is safe for all of us, like we're all here in a good way and we're all supporting each other. It takes away that fear of speaking or being in front of people, because it creates a humbled environment where we feel like we can be ourselves within these spaces. It erodes this hierarchy model that we constantly see within education or within any spaces, how we replicate that within different settings, work, community, etc. And that's why I think these two components also in relation to our ability to see one another's point of views, right? So like if we construct dialogue in the classroom setting with that concept and create that space, it's going to support a Socratic seminar. It's going to support our ability as people with different views going over heavy topics. And this is something that I think has drastically changed since I was going into education, or even when I was a student. There's always differences, don't get me wrong, but back in the day, one of the biggest differences between being a Republican and a Democrat was what your opinion was on the Vietnam War, right? Now everything is being labeled as this and that, and it's making it harder and harder for us to retain our true values, because we construct our understanding over these political ideologies. And because of that, it's becoming more and more challenging to see the humanity of different perspectives of people that are neighbors, right, and community. And I think one thing that's beautiful with this concept that we're learning, Mitakuye, Oyas'in, and establishing the relationship between people, and then also looking at tools in teaching that help support that concept, or just our ability to understand one another, and how important that is for constructive society, for our students to be good at what they do moving forward, whatever degree they're pursuing, whatever workplace they're going into, is the ability to constructively communicate, build understanding amongst one another, because we are stronger together than we are divided, right? And that goes, if it's in regards to a community, in regards to a business, where we can have those tough conversations and have them be constructive. That is hugely important, because anything that's really worth understanding is not an easy conversation to have, right? And if it was, it would have already been figured out and we would have moved on to something else that was more challenging. But let's look at these in terms of how we can take these concepts that we're learning within Indigenous culture, looking at their application within the classroom setting, along with other things that we're already doing to address issues that we have. And when we look at these models, especially in terms of self-regulation, especially in terms of developing emotional intelligence and how important that is for not only academic success, but life success, these are tools that's going to help our students meet and achieve a high degree of understanding within emotional intelligence, self-regulation, how to get along within a group, how to function, and that's going to be more of a supporting indicator than you as a new teacher creating all these rules and then addressing them when they happen. And those addressing components are usually negative, right? Like if you do this, you have ISS. If you do this, you have detention. It's always a threat. And if you know anything about society, right, you can have rules, you can have laws, people are still gonna break them, right? And then if you look at like, well, how does this happen? And you look at it in context of environment and all the other factors, you can kind of understand why some stuff is just like eroding, right? And we don't want that to happen to our classroom. So take these concepts and look at how they could be juxtaposed with other things that we're doing to get an end result, especially when it comes to behavior in our classroom. Because if we have good behavior, if we have constructive dialogue, we as a unit in our classroom or in our communities, in our societies, are going to function better, are going to be able to produce better outcomes for everyone. Okay, so that is the concept behind this article this week, taking these things that we're learning in the context of teaching and learning to see how we can become better teachers and how these tools can support us further.